Okay, so let's start and begin to put together the bits and pieces that we need for our scoreboard. We're going to start with the home team's behind score, and as you saw in the completed version, there were two digits that represented this score, 0 through to 99. We're going to start with just one, just to keep it nice and simple. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to start with a new sprite, and we're going to use one of the ones which comes out of the box with Scratch. In fact, we're going to use several of them. They're these pixel-based sprites. We're going to start with that 0 there. This sprite is going to be the first digit for our home team behinds. So let's put it in roughly in the right spot, which I reckon is about there, give or take, and we'll give it an appropriate name as well. We'll call it what it represents, which is home behinds digit 1. Okay. Now, having done that, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we're going to do a lot of work with costumes, and we use one of the properties of costumes very heavily in this particular project. So I'm going to add some extra costumes for this particular sprite. And not surprisingly, I'm going to add the other 9 numbers that go beyond 0 as well. So let's find them and select them. Sorry, it took me a while to work out how to do a multi-select then. It is Shift and click. We'll add all those, and now you should see all the costumes available. 0 all the way up through to 9. And that's useful because that's all the digits we need for this particular one. Okay, so now that we've got that, we also want to add a trigger to be able to change a particular score. And as you saw, we used the green button in the demo that I showed at the very beginning, and we'll do the same thing here as well. Now I think that's classified under this Things tab. Indeed it is. So add that green button. We'll put it somewhere around about where the behinds are. It's rather large, and we'll address that in a second, but let's start by giving it a name. Again, we'll use an appropriate name. Home behinds, I've spelled that properly, and trigger. Okay. So let's start by doing a couple of things to that little trigger button from a script point of view. We'll begin by getting it to a reasonable size when we first start running the application. And I reckon that 50% is about fine for this. And the other thing we want to do is when we click on that particular trigger, we want it to adjust the number of behinds we have. So that requires another little bit of scripting here. When this sprite is clicked, what do we want to do? Well, we want to broadcast a message. And if you're not familiar with what message broadcasting it is it's basically telling potentially all the other sprites within your particular Scratch application that something has occurred. And the way you tell them what has occurred is by using a custom message. And in this particular case, the message we want to use is home behind added. Seems reasonable enough. Okay, so when I click on that particular sprite, it's not going to do anything at the moment, probably apart from get smaller. Indeed it does. When I click on it, doesn't do anything because even though I'm broadcasting that message, there's no one that's actually receiving it. What we want to receive it is this other sprite that we created. So let's go into that sprite and set him up so that when he receives home behind added, then we're going to play with his costumes. We're just going to say, go to the next costume. And let's see how that goes. All right, so I clicked on the button and went from 9 to 0, then to 1, to 2, to 3, to 4, etc, etc, etc. And as you'll see, it cycles around quite nicely. I don't need to tell it to go back to the start of the costumes. It'll automatically go there by itself. The only other thing I'd like to do, getting back to that particular sprite, is I would like that when we start the application, I'd like it to set itself back to 0 as well. So let's say that when the green flag is clicked, let's go to 0. Okay, quick test. That looks like that's working the way that it's supposed to, and it should still cycle all the way up to 9 and then around again. So that's all that it takes to implement a single digit counter on this particular scoreboard. And to be perfectly honest, if you're playing low scoring sports, hello soccer, hello hockey, this would be more than sufficient for what you need. But the scoring in AFL is higher and more complex than that, so we've got a couple more steps to go.